When I found success, my mom, who'd kicked me out for her new family, suddenly demanded college money for my younger siblings. To give you some background, my mother had me at 20. My biological father was never in the picture. He never wanted kids. She told me they'd only been dating a few months when she got pregnant, so she gave him an out and he took it. She said their breakup was so bitter she didn't even ask for child support, and he refused to pay anyway. Both of them were fine with never speaking again. Luckily, my grandparents were incredibly supportive, which allowed her to finish school and get a job. She dated a few guys when I was little, and then when I was about 8, she started seeing Harry, a coworker. They dated for over 3 years before getting married. Harry and I weren't super close, but we tolerated each other. For years into their marriage, my mom got pregnant and everyone, including me, was thrilled. Looking back, I probably should have seen what was coming, but I just assumed my mom would always be there for me. I hoped she wouldn't abandon me, especially since she'd been through so much raising me alone. She definitely started to distance herself after marrying Harry, and we drifted apart. I thought it was just a phase and things would get better. During her pregnancy, I tried to be supportive, but she seemed to get angrier whenever I was around. To avoid bothering her, I started making myself scarce, but I guess I wasn't scarce enough. 6 months after she gave birth to twins, she and Harry sat me down for a serious talk. They told me they couldn't keep me in the house anymore because they had 2 new children to care for. Since I had just turned 16, they couldn't legally kick me out without getting in trouble. They tried to convince me by emphasizing the financial strain of providing for a big family on their modest income. But honestly, we'd been living comfortably, and I didn't think supporting 2 adults, a teenager, and 2 babies on 2 web engineers' salaries was that hard. It was clear they just wanted me gone. I really didn't want to leave, so I even tried to suggest solutions. If money was the issue, I offered to get a job. But my mom said she wanted to save money and resources for the children who deserved it more. She actually said they deserved to stay with them more than I did, not that they needed it more. That was all I needed to hear. It was obvious I wasn't wanted. They knew I had enough dignity to realize I was unwelcome, so they just subtly pushed me out. Their plan worked. After I left, without even telling me where to go, it wasn't technically an eviction, but it felt exactly the same. They'd put me in an impossible situation, and I felt like I had no choice but to leave. I went straight to my grandparents' house that day. They were upset about what my mother had done, but they didn't cut her off because they wanted to be there for the twins. At 16, I got a part-time job since I couldn't rely on my elderly grandparents financially. I'd see my mom and Harry occasionally when they visited my grandparents with the kids, but they rarely asked about me. They were always very formal, like they didn't miss me at all. In fact, they seemed happier without me around. It hurt to see my mother's reduced irritability, but I knew there was nothing I could do. I lived with my grandparents until college. My mom wasn't involved then either, so I relied on friends to help me move into my dorm since my grandparents weren't healthy enough. My mom and Harry refused to help, preferring to save money for the twins' future. I ended up taking out a student loan, and thankfully one of my uncles co-signed it, but only after I promised he'd never be responsible for any of the costs. I worked throughout college to stay on top of payments and get ahead financially. My mother and I barely spoke once I started college. Only my grandparents were there when I graduated. My mother didn't even bother to congratulate me. After college, to avoid burdening my elderly grandparents, I started working and living on my own. I didn't make much in the first few years, but I could cover groceries, utilities, and rent, and I even started paying off my debt and saving for the future. It was definitely living on a tight budget. Eventually, things turned around. It took a while, but I moved up in my company. I'm proud of how far I've come with so little help, and I'm now pretty comfortable. Out of the blue, my mother found out I'm doing well, even though we hadn't spoken in years. I'm almost 33 and a senior manager at the same company where I started. About 4 months ago, I got a big promotion, which I wanted to keep quiet, so only a select few knew. I did tell my uncle, though, to thank him for co-signing my loan back when I was struggling with college costs. From what I understand, he recently ran into my mom and Harry at a family gathering and urged her to contact me to congratulate me. While I'm sure he meant well, it didn't work. She didn't reach out to congratulate me. Eventually, my mother found out and recently showed up at my house with Harry, insisting on talking. I should mention I hadn't spoken to her since I started college. I'd blocked her everywhere and cut her out of my life after graduating because I saw no point in hoping she'd change. She didn't seem to care, and honestly, I doubt she even noticed. Only my grandparents, who knew I hated talking about my mother, stayed in touch, and they avoided the subject. I hadn't really stayed in touch with my uncle either, so I didn't know my mom and Harry had been struggling financially for a few years. I only found out when they showed up at my door and told me how bad things had gotten. I let them in, hoping against hope they were there to make amends. They started by saying my uncle told them about my promotion and how I was one of the youngest in such a high position at my company. Instead of congratulating me, they seemed surprised I'd kept it from them. Ironically, I was shocked they expected me to communicate with them at all, let alone share good news. They were also upset I'd cut them off, claiming it was only because they'd prioritized their other children. They insisted I should have been old enough as a teenager to understand their rearranged priorities and not hold a grudge. They even said I should have supported their decisions instead of moving in with my grandparents. I still don't know why they thought I'd agree with their choice to kick me out. That's how they started our reunion after all these years. They then launched into how tough the past few years had been for them, without even giving me a chance to explain my side. They talked about starting their own company, how it failed, and the losses they incurred. They were now trying to recover from those losses and desperately needed money because the twins were nearing college age. That's when I understood why they were there. They needed financial help. They didn't waste any time getting to the point, even trying to sugarcoat it by saying I could make it up to them by paying for my siblings' schooling. The audacity! They were upset I hadn't contacted them despite doing well. And they tried to make it seem like they were doing me a favor by letting me pay for the college education of 2 kids I barely knew. I was stunned. I immediately told them no, and that it was disrespectful of them to think they could strong-arm me into it. I got angry and reminded them that they were the reason I had to work through college and pay for my own education. They refused to support me then because they wanted to save for their real children who deserved it more than I did. I told them they had no right to expect anything from me now, especially financial support. I'd never questioned their choice to prioritize the twins. I just left them alone. They no longer had the right to demand I communicate with them. Instead of trying to emotionally manipulate me, I pointed out that they could now use the money they'd conserved for the children who deserved it to pay for the twins' college bills. I had nothing else to say and asked them to leave. I was stupid to invite them in, assuming they might have come to express regret for how they treated me. They got irritated and tried to shift the blame. As I insisted they leave, they told me I wasn't innocent. In their defense, they said I was overenthusiastic, overinvolved, and frequently irritable when we all lived together. I was just a teenager trying to stay connected with my family as they pulled away, so I couldn't believe that was their real issue with me. Then, they had the nerve to claim I was no better than them because I denied their request. They said I was forgetting all the years my mother raised me alone and that this was my chance to make it up to her and my siblings. But instead, I was being rude and unappreciative. I thought it was absurd they'd bring that up. I was a child then and couldn't have chosen not to rely on them. Besides, it wasn't like they were helping me. They pushed me out as soon as they thought I was mature enough to handle things on my own. For the next 18 years, they refused to acknowledge my existence. I was still shocked they had the gall to expect my help now, as if I owed them something after everything. The argument got personal and ugly, and I finally threatened to call the police if they didn't leave. My mother brought up all the sacrifices she made when I was younger, supposedly because she wanted to be a good mother. After more arguing, they finally left. She said I was ungrateful for the one time she expected me to sympathize with her situation and let her prioritize others over me. She now claimed I was making her out to be the villain. Since then, this has been bothering me. I'm struggling to figure out if I'm to blame, if I've been expecting too much from my mother, or if she's just trying to manipulate me. I decided to post on Reddit for unbiased opinions, even though I'm pretty sure I'm right. Am I the jerk for not paying for my half-siblings' college tuition just because my stepfather and estranged mother are having financial difficulties? My uncle's intentions were good, but I reminded him that what he did was wrong and unacceptable. His actions definitely had a negative impact. If he hadn't shared details of my life with my mother and given her my contact info without my consent, I wouldn't be in this situation. He apologized profusely, saying he didn't know about their financial troubles and had no idea my mother would react this way. He admitted he had no business telling my mother about my life and that if we wanted to reconnect, we would have done it without his help. Since his heart was in the right place, I don't plan to cut him out of my life. I would have been much angrier if he'd had different intentions. He just made a mistake. Plus, he's the reason I could even go to college in the first place. He was the only one willing to co-sign my loan. If you think about it, I might not be where I am without him. I made sure he knew what he did wasn't okay, because I don't want to seem unappreciative, but I'm also not a doormat. I think I found the right balance. We're doing great, and I won't hold it against him because I needed this resolution. I also discussed my mom's recent struggles with my grandparents. They agree with me and have promised to try and persuade her to change her mind. I realize they've stayed in touch with my mom because they don't want to lose contact with their other grandchildren. They understand the difficulties my mom's family is facing, but they don't think it's right or fair to put me through this. That's their stance, and I think it's reasonable enough. My mother showing up at my workplace earlier today was probably the most bizarre thing she's ever done. Fortunately, I wasn't working, so she left pretty quickly and didn't succeed. I was feeling a bit under the weather, so I decided to take the day off, and I'm so glad I did. If I had been there, she definitely would have thrown a fit or done something to make me look foolish. The receptionist called to tell me my mom was there, wanting to see me and refusing to leave even after being told I wasn't there. I learned the truth when they put her on the phone. I firmly told her I was home. I was already pretty anxious about what she might do, so I informed her that if she tried anything at my job, I would sue her until she'd be too ashamed to send her children to college. I tried my best to sound threatening, and I think it really scared her. She agreed to leave right away, provided I met her in person. So it must have worked. I reminded her she couldn't afford a lawsuit right now and that she wasn't in a position to make demands. I also mentioned that my employer wouldn't hesitate to sue her if the situation escalated, which would be a very different scenario because they wouldn't be as forgiving as I'd been. She'd be better off just leaving quietly. I didn't get any more calls or notifications about the incident, so I guess she left after the receptionist gave her the phone back. I can't afford for this to happen again. That was definitely a close call. I've decided to speak with a lawyer to find out what precautions I can take. She hasn't directly threatened me, so I'm not sure if this is enough for a restraining order, but I still want to discuss my options with an attorney. I just have to hope this experience was unpleasant enough for her to consider leaving me alone. I guess I don't need to consider filing a restraining order, as I'm pretty sure we have grounds for one now. Last week, I managed to get my mother to leave my workplace. However, given this week's events, I believe a restraining order against her needs to be issued for everyone's sake. A few days ago, she was waiting outside my door when I got home from work. I immediately told her I didn't want to argue and would call the police if she didn't leave. She practically lunged at me and threw me to the ground, sending my phone flying out of my hands just as I was about to dial. She cursed at me and blamed me for everything that had gone wrong in her life while trying to hit me. It took me a moment to react because I was so shocked by her insane behavior. However, since I work out consistently and am much younger than her, it was easy for me to overpower her when I did. Fortunately, all the shouting alerted my neighbors who called the police. They even came to my aid and restrained my mother while we waited for the cops to arrive. When the police finally showed up, I decided to press charges. She's now in a lot of trouble. Additionally, I've discussed this with my attorney and requested a restraining order against her. I've been informed that Harry has taken the children and moved in with his parents. I'm not sure if he plans to come back anytime soon. He apparently confronted her about her behavior after bailing her out and told her she couldn't keep acting this way. She even got into a fight with him, which seems to suggest she's truly lost it. I think she struggles to believe I'm doing well, but honestly, she's to blame for her own issues. I won't feel sorry for her. I'll have the restraining order in place soon. And since I'm making more money, I've already started thinking about moving into a bigger home, as now seems like the perfect time. I'm going to start exploring my options. Being associated with someone like that is embarrassing, so I truly hope my mother gets the support she needs and learns to behave normally. She's also been nasty to my grandparents, who have told me they no longer want to be around her. She has only herself to blame for everyone avoiding her. Anyway, I'm not worried about it anymore. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.